Cool, awesome. All right, start the recording. So welcome everyone to the DM workshop once again for the third time. My name is Tyler Sterle, and then we got Daniel Mishler over here. And today we're going to be talking about maps, just like everything about maps, and basically why we use them. Do you even need them in the first place, and how you might be able to make them. So generally, maps are like many things in D&D. You have lots of different like visual aids or other sorts of like aids of some kind to help tell the story. Because like, at the bare bones, most role playing games can be played by simply like talking with one another. So you could have your character sheets even. Um, so generally speaking, you're always there. There's still an aid to help you play the game and to help you tell the story. Dice are as well, and maps are like kind of like falling under like a similar category. They just like serve a different purpose like, in that sense. So they're mostly like a visual aid to help to represent things that might be going on like in the world. So specifically, they're going to be used more for things like combat or like exploration encounters and sometimes for travel, but you can actually use them for like more social encounters as well if you'd like to. And it's not really necessary to actually have maps like where you can show characters and things on it. But like I said again, it is this. It's like a visual representation and aid to help tell the story and to help like you and your players figure out like how to represent things that are going on like in the environment. So like in particular with combat, it's pretty hard to represent like when people are like certain distances away from each other or exactly what statuses are like in the environment going on around you. With a map it's really helpful to help like keep that organized without having to basically just give like a huge word vomit like all the time, trying to make sure that everyone is like not really forgetting anything. And another part of that too is just that when you're trying to just simply describe everything with words, it can be easy to forget some little details here and there. So it's nice to keep that really organized there. And it also gives like another mode of interaction, for the players too, just to be able to like have them like actually like move around, kind of like if it was a board game, like to move their characters like in different areas without having to say like I'm moving forward 5 feet and I move left and I move right and things like that. But essentially, it kind of helps to reserve the mental real estate, if you will, like so you can preserve that for other things that you might be caring about, like talking to other people. So as far as maps that you want, now there's a whole bunch of ways you can do this, but generally speaking, what you're going to find is that there's like three kind of categories of maps. There's like the really like fully detailed ones, and this could be like 3D, like just like in front of you, like actual like figurines, and there could be actual like building structures, like tiny structures in there, or it could be 2D where it's like a larger like picture. So it could be that where it has like full details, and it almost just kind of looks like a picture that you would see, like just like a painting or just like a picture that someone would take in general. Typically, these are done in a top-down view where you can see the characters. And then you could also have just like simple geometry, which can also be much more common in the in-person like meetings, or like just when you're playing with your other people or sometimes even online. But these are going to be more your maps where they might just have a couple of squares to represent like certain rooms, or like a door is here, like a couple lines. So like it's not super complex, but they're going to represent some of the most important things, like as far as keeping your characters, sort of knowing what their bounds are, like or sort of like boundaries. And the rest of the details are sort of filled in through description of the DM and a little bit of the players as well, because you can sort of have players where like they may ask if a certain thing is there, like for say you maybe you go up like to like the bottom of a well, like, and they may ask like is there like a rope with a bucket there, and you may not have originally planned for that bucket to be there, but maybe like it actually is, or it can be, because like if you haven't told them there wasn't, a bucket there. Now there can be. And so like another big thing with this, this isn't necessarily a map, but you might just decide to use theater of the mind entirely to describe like what's going on in your games. So that would just be not even having to have like any map whatsoever, and you're completely describing the area, kind of like you would like when you see a description like in a book, or like just completely like text based. And so that's going to rely a lot more on your players like in you to sort of work together to imagine like what's going on inside of it. And so the less and less detail that you show visually, the more that your players and you are going to have to fill in those gaps with your imagination, where people can have like different interpretations, kind of like when you're reading a book, so they can be slightly different here and there. And as far as things that you want to be specific, that that like are not by interpretation, like where you're saying like there is a chest right here, then it's just good to make those clear. And we'll kind of go into the pros and cons of those here as well. But first, just to kind of show you some examples, we're going to kind of show you a couple of these different maps and what they might look like here. So I will show actually the first one. I'm actually a very fond DM of like those ones that are super detailed. So I will show you what that looks like here. I'm going to share my screen again here. Yeah, cool. So this is actually a tool I use called Dungeon Fog. Not a sponsorship, by the way, but I do like it. It's really cool. It's really nice, like for a software for making really nice looking maps like online. It's like fairly easy to do so. But as you can see right here, I'll also show you on. I have actually taken this and put it on Roll20. That specifically, if you have this kind of map, you'll see there's like there's wooden planks on the floor. There's like a fireplace over here to the top right. There's like all kinds of stuff basically. So it's like there's just basically there's like all sorts of little details here and there, the furniture, different things like that. And so here it's like there's like you can show like exactly what you were trying to show earlier. And specifically, this map is it's like the top floor of an inn. So so it's supposed to be like an inn that they're spending the night at. So you can see there's like little furniture put in here, like bookshelves, and there's just like different rugs and different things like that. And it's really easy to show, like where the characters can be here. And now I'll show you over here. So this, we go take it over here to the next one. I'll take you over here. So this is the same map. This is like simple geometry right here. This is the same map as you saw before, but all we have here are just like a couple of lines that are separating out the rooms. And like specifically, this is like the entire like top floor. This is just basically a crude way of showing stairs. So you can see that it's a lot easier to make this one. In fact, I think this map actually took me like 30 seconds to make. And then another way you could do it is if you wanted to say, like if you wanted to go back to the original description, you could say something like as you're going up the stairs, you feel like the creak of like the old wood beneath your feet, and like some of the steps kind of coming up as the nails aren't fully in, and like you see a couple of the rooms down the hall. You see the warm like faint glow of a fire like off to the distance, and you kind of keep describing more of these details in your mind. So that would be more theater of the mind, where you're describing like to your players like what's out there. And so maybe when they step in the room, I could say, you see these little dust particles floating like in the light from the window, like in the middle. You see like a half melted candle that's sitting on this little table like next to it. You see like this bear rug that's kind of sprawled out in the middle. And those amount of details you can give like as much as you want. It's kind of just up to you, because like the more details you give, the more time it takes, like where like maybe like the plot isn't progressing. So it's kind of however much you want to give. And you can put in more or like leave things out. And maybe even the advantage to that is like when you're not even seeing anything, like we were talking about earlier, that the players can kind of help you fill in those gaps by, like with them making suggestions. Well, if you didn't say that something wasn't there, why can't it be? It can be there like right when you need it to. And so specifically, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. But when you have these different types of maps, they can kind of go to a variety of different scales. Like I just showed you, like just basically like a single room, but you can also have like a bigger like outside environment, like a forest. You could have an entire town. And sometimes you can have like an entire continent to also display information. So I asked Danny over here because he has a map of like his continent in this world called Sapaga. So I'll let him kind of show you a little bit about that here.
Yeah, so there is to contextualize this, there are a lot of different types of maps, and as Tyler said, the main reason why we use maps because we're DMs, we're trying to tell a story, and maps are a tool that let us help tell the story, and it's especially useful to have players use these resources to look around. Um, you can also have maps of entire continents, and this is really helpful for campaigns that involve travel, especially if you kind of tell people, like I put a scale at the bottom of this map. Well, this length is say 100 miles. Well, that's that means that it takes 3 days at least to get across 100 miles. 5 days you're carrying a lot of stuff, and you can adjust the scale however you want, let the party travel faster or slower. But if they start in Sajiv and they want to get to Galt, it's going to take 6 days. They can go through Kamal, or they can try to go through the marsh. And this map was just made off of just as a fun fact. You can just take a map from a plugin from Minecraft and take a terrain off Minecraft, and then it just kind of gives it to you. And then you can upgrade it in Photoshop. It turns out to be a great tool. I don't want to take full credit for this though, because most of this map was my brother's idea, Thomas, who's also a member of the club. And he even continued along with this map and went ahead and added a lot more regions, and a lot more even beyond the frontier and things like that. But seeing something like this, even if the party's not going to travel the map, can give them context for the world that you're in. One of the parts about Sapaga is that there tend to be more and more orcs as you get close to the frontier, and everybody hates orcs because orcs just plunder and pillage, and Jarlford is back and forth between orcs and humans. So it kind of helps contextualize where you're at, and also just seeing the map helps you give a good feeling for the setting in general.
Yeah, it's really helpful, especially like you said, like with the context and everything, because being able to utilize like more of those human senses can like help to really describe and communicate like what you've been trying to say before. So like trying to do like just like by hearing and seeing, you can describe a lot more and show a lot more. Yeah, and the nice thing too is, like Danny said, that there are some easy ways to make maps, or at least fairly easy ways that may not even take you like as much effort as it seems like you'd have to. Like with my maps, I was like actually going through and like fully detailing all that, or you can just take one off of Minecraft basically, and that works too. It's and both of them, all of them are valid, and like all of them that you want to. It's really kind of a little bit of a balance of how much do you want to put into working on your maps, and like what kind of detail would you like, because it's like sometimes you may just prefer to not really like put in like a ton of effort into building each individual part, or maybe that's something you enjoy. Like I love building like those little maps and getting to show that in, like show all those little details. But for some people, maybe that's not so fun. And you shouldn't really have to make it feel like it's a huge chore, like to be making those maps. As like being a DM, even the preparation should be fun for you. So, and the nice thing about like a map like Danny was showing there with the world map is there are some DMs like I've even played with that like when they make their world maps, it'll be back to that like simple geometry where they'll just kind of make a rough outline of the world. Maybe they'll have like a couple of dots for cities, and then maybe like a couple of major things like mountains. Maybe they'll like draw some diagonal lines like here and there, like some what looks like a little simple doodle of a mountain. So it's nice that you have that room for creativity and choice that as well. Um,
Yeah, I wanna echo on that and say that the map didn't happen overnight. Um, there were a lot of I'll keep going here. This is an older version of the same map. You'll notice that we're missing the Fading Woods, we're missing Abelhingst, we're missing Stanlow, or well, we still have Stanlow, but you can even see that my brother and I are talking about different places where different towns might be existing. And these maps are built over a long time. I've actually found that for maps like these, you can build them over a long period of time. And you don't have to have everything answered immediately.
that's really nice. Yeah,
And that's where the improv ties in. Now, for those more advanced DMs, it turns out you also don't really need a map for most places the party goes. You can draw one up really quick if you want to open paint, and you can like think, well, I want the party to enter in. I want the party to enter the dungeon in a big room. There's going to be a hidden chamber. There will be a kind of a boss fight room, maybe a secret room back here, and maybe there's a little place for supplies in this area. And now you've already got a decent idea of where the party's going to go. And if you keep this behind the screen and draw out on a little mat in front of you, um, then you've just made a full map. Like it, it can happen. It can happen that fast.
really,
And
it's that simple. Yeah,
yeah, the entire purpose of the map is like so that you and the players don't have to think as much about who is where and who's on first and what's on second and all of that. Um, and over time, you're more than welcome to make. I managed to find this. This is one of the more intense maps that we make, and I want to again give full credit to my brother who made this online digital version of the map because I had a drawn out version of the map. That's now and everybody can look at it. Um, but this also didn't happen overnight. Um, this was a dungeon that was designed over a long time, and then eventually we decided to finalize this. So that's the whole idea. That's the whole idea behind maps. They're a tool for you to use that you don't have to make immediately, and as as long as you have ideas, you can just kind of start building this repertoire of where the party can go and how they can explore the area.
yeah. Thank you, Danny. Thanks for sharing all that and going through your different examples. But yeah, so as far as going into like some pros and cons of like some of the different kinds of maps that you can make, we've kind of already touched on them a little bit, like here and there. But let's say like you're thinking about making like one of those maps that have like the higher definition, like the like fuller detail. It is some nice things about it. It's easier to communicate those finer details, like of exactly what it is in the area, without having to use like your words. So and it's nicer because like you can share like a lot more and like visually what you're trying to represent like in that interpretation that you had before, like a lot more easily. So like you saw before with my like little inn that I had, like I could show like exactly what the chest might have looked like or like the fireplace. And sometimes special interactions with objects like may happen that otherwise like wouldn't have happened that like you wouldn't have said originally. So like I had like for one of my first games, I like had a little house and they were in this sort of like it's like a party room of sorts. It was like a living room, and then there was like this rug like underneath, like on the floor that I didn't really talk too much about, and my players like ended up deciding like, ooh, maybe there's something secret under here, and then end up deciding to like kind of cut a line right through it to like go through it. On one of my players in the same room actually decided it would be fun to climb the curtain that they saw on the wall, like to be able to get a little bit higher up and get a bigger vantage point for shooting his rifle. So sometimes you can get some neat things like that, and I found that happens a lot in my campaigns. And it kind of like I said earlier, it helps to sort of paint the scene the way that you intended. So if you have like a specific interpretation that you want to get out, that's one great thing about that. And some cons of this. it's going to take a lot of creation effort, like as far as like actual effort. Most of it is going to take you like some time to make those nice maps. And like Danny said, you actually don't really need a map for most things you do in D&D. Like just, but even some of those maps do take a little bit of time and effort. And so that tool I was using earlier, like Dungeon Fog, has definitely reduced a lot of my efforts. But it's like sometimes you can use tools like that here and there, but it does take a little bit of time and the thought to really place like all of those things like exactly where you want them to be. And on the same lines, when you're showing them a specific interpretation, it could kind of hinder the creative inspiration like from other players. So it's a lot less likely that you may have someone like ask if something is there and then like have it be there because you have this specific interpretation where there's not a whole lot of room for um, like ideas from other players. It's just this is what the room looks like exactly, and this is exactly what's in it. So that's one like kind of like pitfall of doing that. So if we're going to go with like more of those simple geometry maps, like just the shapes, they're a lot easier to create in that instance. Like if you need like a really quick map, kind of like Danny was saying earlier, like if some random combat scene happens, you can just boom, quickly put a couple of squares, maybe some staircases here and there, some other details, whatever you'd like. You can just
Hmm.
kind of add that really easily. Um,
It's always better to add it before the fact than after the fact,
yeah.
because whenever you set the scene, I think that one of the things we've been dancing around is this entire meta idea of D&D that like things are only real until they're not real until you tell it to the party, and especially if they're in a combat scene and they don't know what's going on. That's also not fair to the players, if you because there's this entire environment that they could be interacting with, and it's really important to kind of have some sort of like, okay, here's exactly what's going on, and often your players will kind of nudge you if you're not doing that. Your players will kind of tell you, they'll let you know that they're not getting enough from you. They'll
Mhm.
tell you, well, what's the room look like, and so that's a good catch-all. But I want to kind of elaborate on an example of how using the map can also help that environment, because there's a time that I didn't use a map that I found was actually quite important. So I want to
Sure.
emphasize. So this is a creature that someone in my party fought, or my party fought two of these creatures, and these are called Mantle Roaches. So I put these in the notes. And one of the things that they didn't seem to understand, because there wasn't any visual representation, is that from here to here was 7 feet. This thing was 7 feet tall.
Pretty
Um,
big.
so I was, and when I told them that they were mantle roaches, they were thinking they were these tiny things, and they tried to fight them, and like the party basically almost they lost 80% of their resources to an encounter that they weren't even intended to fight, and they struggled the entire rest of the next 3 sessions because of that. And on and on the fault is like it's not a bad thing, first of all, because that's kind of the fun of D&D, is that now this happened, now you have to deal with it. On my end, if there were a map, I could have done a better job of telling the party that like these things are huge creatures, and you're level 2, you know and they tried to fight it anyway. Granted, I think that they were ready to fight whatever showed up out of the ground. So I don't think that telling them the size of the thing would have made it any would have swayed their decision. But it's a piece of information that having a map or some sort of place to draw these monsters on would have actually been really helpful. And that's one of the that's one of the cons of playing right now. If you're playing in a in-person setting, there's also this not everyone's crowded around the same table anymore. You kind of spread out, and that's just how things are. And you kind of got to work with the constraints you got. Maybe you could put it on the screen. I find that having a big whiteboard helps, but it is important to give the players that information to work with.
Yeah, I was actually just about to get to that too, Danny. Thank you for sharing that example. That, like we said, one of those cons is that it can be a little bit more difficult to communicate those smaller, minute details, and that, like in there, because you may not see as much originally, or may not be fully aware of what's in the environment, that it could lead to less creative potential for what the players could think to do. But a couple of other nice things, like some pros about it. It's easy to create, but it's also easy to like edit during the sessions. Like if something changes, like it's really, really easy to change that. Like we're just to be able to represent it in there, and it's kind of like a pro and a con that it allows players to like paint what's in the environment to help you do that, but at the same time it can be harder to really know all those details like at the same time. um, and kind of like the last thing we'll touch on here, just with that theater of the mind we were talking about, where you don't even use a map at all. Well, it can be easy to create. Like I say easy because it's actually like only communicated through words. So like if it's a little bit more difficult to come up with those like textual descriptions for you, then maybe this is actually really hard. But if it is easy to just like talk about those details in your game, then this can be relatively easy as well. It gives even more room for the players to like jump in and help you paint the environment, and it's really easy to edit those sort of details on the fly. But a couple of problems you might run into is that a lot of times, like auditory information and just like things that you say could be forgotten pretty easily. Like it's not easy to like go back and check something because like you have no visual reference there that's just stagnant. It's just you hear it one time, and then if you forget it, you have to like ask for it again. So it could be kind of challenging to remember like some of those details, and you might get like a couple questions here and there, especially if they're very complex and like detailed. Um, and like we were saying earlier, it can be challenged to do like balanced combat. Like it can be challenging to represent distances, like whether your rogue is going to have sneak attack or not. There's a lot of different details that you have to keep track at once, and that when they're just going to be said, you're just expecting, you'd have to expect the players to remember it. And sometimes it's a little bit hard to remember all those details. So it's nice to be able to use the maps like as a visual aid to help keep track of that with you guys. And like I was saying earlier, this may not be a huge con for you, but as far as like, the descriptions with words, but if it's harder to give vivid descriptions like with your words, then it could be kind of challenging to really give the full picture of what's going on for your players, because they may not get all the details, or really even just the most salient or the most important ones. Did you have something to add on to that, Danny?
I think that's a great way to sum up what maps are for.
Yeah, I'd say so too. Cool. All right. Let's see. Did anyone have any particular questions they wanted to talk about right now? If not, we can just do it after the recording.
Well, I think that will wrap up the recording for this. Thanks for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, we're finally starting to get a decent library of content here on the YouTube channel, so I'm excited about that. And we'll see you in about 2 more weeks for another DM workshop.